I have a solution for all the debt problems that we have. I think so. And that is, who do we need to talk to give us a clean slate? Because clearly, the way Nga was speaking, we were dealt a bad hand. I don't know who went to the negotiations to start negotiating for us to get. We were dealt a bad hand. We know that now. We need a clean slate and we start from fresh. Isn't that possible, Valentine? Can't we just ask for, oh, declare bankruptcy? Doesn't that work? You declare bankruptcy, all good.
I think it's actually possible. What you just need to do is, what I understand is that it's a multi-sectoral engagement, but we need to have political goodwill, because the political goodwill in all of this is what's actually going to be the solution to this Africa debt issue. We need to have leaders come in who are hell-bent towards improving the economic status of their countries, as opposed to the other aspect of unjust enrichment. So once we have political goodwill, then the laws are going to make sense. The court is doing its part, and the citizen will now pay the taxes, understanding that indeed what I'm paying for is going to work for me. But political goodwill is number one for me.
And now, who do we need to lobby? Who do we need to advocate? Which offices are we supposed to be standing outside right now, telling them clean slate? Clean slate, let's start with zero debt.
You know, I want to ask a question, Lizzie, before I ask that to Valentine, because, and I always want to ask this question, even to the politicians themselves. What does political goodwill mean and look like? Because everything we say is we need political will. We need political goodwill. When you're elected into office, you are there to represent the interest of your citizens. Then suddenly, you no longer remember the interest, or, the policy doesn't favor it, or, the language can't be changed. So I'm very curious to know, what does political goodwill look like? So I'm going to pause that. You may come back to that. Now, Lizzie, who do we need to speak to? If it was me, we need to be speaking to everyone in the room. You asked the question that, now another question has escaped me, but I'll come back to it. When you are negotiating, yes, who went to the negotiation table? Those people go to the IMF. It's your Minister of Finance and his advisors. It's the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I don't know, because if they don't like your country, maybe they don't give you good interest rates. But those are all individuals. And what I have learned in this space, when you network in advocacy, you realize that if I write to the office of the president, I'm unlikely to get a something. But if I meet the president in a gathering and I see him as a person and he sees me as a person, we are likely to set up a meeting. I think we need to stop hiding behind policies and titles and just look at each other and say, look, we can't do this as a nation. I know it sounds like very frivolous, like, okay, this is wishful thinking, but we overcomplicate this. We need the IMF to read the policies with a human story. There's a rise in storytelling as a policy tool for a reason, because often we have been making these policies as though they are governing non-entities. Then we are like, but people have died. And then you're like, but you knew they were for people. So I think we really need to go back to treating each other as people and not prioritizing numbers, not prioritizing profits. We always say when we're advocating against farmer greed, people, lives before profits, people before profits. So I think the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the President himself, all line ministers, because everyone is serving people, sit at the table. But transparency, that term came out. Be transparent about where you are. Confront each other, which also means that you might find that even corruption comes into the conversation. Deal with that first, because we can't be pouring money into a leaking bucket. At the end of the day, you can't continue to be given money when you can't show what it has done before. So people before anything else.